Okay, I believe we're recording. Today is September 14, 2017, and in following up on my previous YouTube video, which itself had been named the Literacy Challenge of Complexity Science, this is a follow-up, and to help. I myself struggle with understanding the details and the complexities of complex adaptive systems. We're surrounded by them. Our economy, the world we live in, your town, the people on your street, the people in your family, perhaps, if it's a big family. So we're going to talk today about, I'm going to present 4 different examples of not of complex adaptive systems, but of other types of adaptive systems that can help us understand some of the surprises and details of the complex adaptive systems we all deal with. So let's see, where are we? Okay, all right. So right, and so we're going to talk about why goals are bad, why relationships are good, and the role of surprise. All right. So the introduction. First, complex adaptive systems are difficult because they are a complex adaptive system. Complex means that there's a lot of elements, and an adaptive. Each agent is itself capable of making up its own mind about things and adapting in different ways. And those, because they, if you studied very hard, let's say if you're playing poker, if you were an excellent poker player and knew how to read people, you could predict what another person is going to do. But now, ultimately, what if the other person was a very bad poker player? They might do crazy things. So, and thirdly, I mean, not only are they complex adaptive systems with lots of elements, and complex adaptive systems in that people could be adapting in all kinds of ways to all kinds of things, but there are systems where the elements are related to each other. So what can we do to simply learn about them? Okay, so one approach is to simplify a CAS down to in different ways. So the first would be to reduce the number of adaptive agents. So what if we had an adaptive system with only 2 agents? For instance, your relationship with a significant other. Okay, let's say you meet another humanoid on this planet. You know, I'm assuming that you're some sort of human, and so you might meet one. Okay, and you meet the person, and he or she seems to like your company, and you like their company. Perhaps they're attractive, or seem to have a lot of money, or for whatever reason, things are going along just fine. And so you feel accepted, and the feeling is genuine. And so you have a relationship that you're going along and with no obvious goal other than just liking to spend time with each other. And that's not a goal. That's just stating what's going on. I mean, okay. And then let's say a couple months into the relationship, or you both get drunk one night and start saying things that you wouldn't say otherwise. And this partner, this other person you're in a relationship with, says and admits something, that he or she actually wants you to become a lawyer, you know, or they want you to do something that they've always been disappointed that you're not taking some kind of action or desisting from some kind of action. They want you to lose weight, or change the color of your hair, or make more money, you know. I mean, all kinds of different goals. Suddenly there's a goal in the relationship, and now it's not that simple anymore. And how do you feel about that? Generally, you don't feel quite as accepted as you did before, and that may change. And once you learn that, even if the person sobers up and promises that they never had any such idea and stuff, the cat's been let out of the bag. You've heard the person say it, and you can't go back. Now you have to deal with whatever's going on with that. All right. So suddenly, this simple adaptive system is not so simple anymore. Well, that's already complicated, and so it's an example of how, So let's try understanding an even simpler one. Let's pick another a situation where the person you're in a relationship with, or being, is even less adaptive. That there's a lot that they can't do. Okay, so we can reduce the adaptive range of one of the agents. Okay, so we'll pick a relationship with a house pet, such as a dog, for example. A dog can adapt, but it cannot discuss adaptive agency with you, for instance, or it cannot read poetry, or well, it probably could get drunk with you, but and I'm not sure. There may be more limits on the relationship. All right, so let's pick a simple a pair of simple examples. One is you arrive home from work after a long, hard day of doing whatever it is that you do to make a living, and the dog is pleased to see you, and as far as you can tell, the creature is full of acceptance and loves you the way you are, and is just so happy to see you. If it's a cat, the cat may be kind of happy to see you, but it depends on the cat. They're not as uniform in their behavior as far as I can tell. Okay, but now let's go to a different scenario where you're in the kitchen. Perhaps you're cooking, or perhaps you're opening a can of cat food. Or if in the case of a dog, perhaps you're not a vegetarian and you're cutting up meat on the kitchen counter, something that really smells like bacon. Suddenly you're not alone in the kitchen. There's a dog right next to you, and is this dog gazing at your face in rapt adoration? No, it's not. It's gazing at the kitchen counter, perhaps drooling. Now suddenly there's a goal that's obvious to you. It's not obvious to the animal, but you are not nearly as important as this intended goal, and so the relationship is not what it was. Okay, things are a little more complicated. All right, so let's try an even more simple adaptive system. Maybe not even adapted. Okay, so how can we make it even simpler? Let's take something that cannot adapt at all, like a rock. Okay, so here's a story that I swear truly happened to me long ago, and then maybe around the time of the harmonic convergence, if you remember the 1980s. When was that? 1988, 87? I forget. But my wife and I were vacationing in near Mount Shasta, California, and in fact we were on a hike. We had walked around Mount Shasta to the east side of the mountain, and we're sitting around after all this long hiking and stuff, drinking out of our canteens, and just kind of puttering and looking at all the rocks and stuff. And there were lots of little pieces of pumice, so it was really soft rock all over. And I, in a moment of idleness, I was just sitting in the sun, just glad to be off my feet, sitting on a rock with my feet sticking out in front of me. And I reached down with both hands and just picked up a pair of these pebbles. They are about the size of my thumb, rocks made out of pumice. Okay, they weren't big. Maybe they're a little larger than my thumbs. And just as a 6-year-old might do, I brought the two faces of these rocks together, and my intention was to grind them together so that each would be flat. I thought, this is really soft rock, this would work. And when I brought those two pieces together, I halted immediately and freaked out a little bit, because the way that I had picked up one from one side of my body, the other one from a foot, 2 feet away on the other side, and when I brought them together, that moment they fit perfectly. These two had been part of the very same rock. The edges of each, where they came together, were a little worn, so they'd been apart for some time and, kind of stepped on and stuff. But yes, you could rotate them and try to fit them together other ways, and they would not fit, except the way that I had originally brought them together. This freaked me out. Okay, what does that mean? Did we discover a new agent? I mean, was what I seeing imaginary? you would need to keep those two rocks as an evidence to yourself that this could even happen. I mean, how crazy is this? So you can believe. I'm just telling you what happened to me. Okay, but this could have been did we discover new agents? I mean, there's a challenge involved with that, I guess. What is your worldview made out of, and then what do you imagine it's made out of after such an experience? Okay, so let's. I'd like to depart from that. As you know, for instance, these two rocks, they did adapt because they were sitting in the sun, and one of them was bleached on one side, and the other was bleached in a different spot. So you could tell that they had been laying there waiting for me to pick them up for probably many years. And it's just one of these things. Okay, so I'll call that a much simpler adaptive system, although adaptation, as far as I could tell, the rock wasn't doing any adapting. But let's go on to the next example. Maybe, and I'll call this a disturbing adaptive system, okay? So we know that rocks can adapt. In fact, when my wife and I used to spend time with Native American groups, they would speak about rocks that were used in their sweat lodges, their Nipi ceremonies. These were Lakota folks, and we did a lot of sweat lodges, and of course, what goes on in a sweat lodge stays in the sweat lodge. You don't talk about things like that. But the next morning after one, I was cleaning out the pit. You do a lot. There's a lot of work taking the lodge apart and pulling the rocks out of the pit, and folks were stacking them up in kind of a semicircle and stuff. And this was about the time that my father had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer. Okay? How would that relate to anything? But I was on my knees in front of this round pit about 2-3 feet across, and I was picking up rocks that were about the size of maybe a football, and lifting them. Now, when a rock has been through the heating process and stuff like that, they become much lighter and brittle and kind of crumbly almost, okay? And so I picked up one of these rocks with both hands, and as I lifted it, it split in two. Actually, it didn't split in two. I had one half in each hand, but they're split into three, because in the center of this roundish rock, about the size of a football, there was about a 2-inch fragment that had been in the middle of the rock, and you're just going to have to accept my word for this. I have no photographic evidence or anything, but it was in the shape of a heart, a little Valentine-style heart. It was about an inch and a half, 2 inches across from top to bottom and side to side, and it was very symmetrical, and the only flaw was at the very tip of where the two sides of the heart would come together to make a point. That end was just cracked off a little bit, but otherwise this looked like a heart. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this was my father, who had just been diagnosed with esophageal cancer. So I'll put the questions to you. Is this rocks adapting? Does my notions of how complicated the adaptive system can be, would that be helpful at this point? Are we dealing with invisible agents? Would we be dealing with agency and complexity that could be far beyond our own ability to comprehend? And I'll end with this question. Could our systems be much more complicated than we personally allow for? You make up your mind, and it's one thing to have a coincidence, but something like this is way, way more than a coincidence. Just getting the rock to split in the way that it did, the odds are pretty stiff. It could have been shaped in the shape of a car or of a liver or some other inscrutable thing. So so the challenge in this particular instance, and maybe the previous one, is one of relationship. That when we assume that there's no adaptation going on, or we assume that things are simpler than they are, or we assume that surprises cannot come from different directions, my counsel is to beware, and beware oversimplifying anything, and instead to be alert for relationship wherever it may appear to be. Of course, you draw your own conclusions. So that's the end of this video. It's my YouTube channel. Earlier I said I gave you the wrong string. It's actually Steve Bieneman. And if you haven't seen the one where I describe complex adaptive systems and why understanding a little bit about them is important, that's called The Literacy Challenge of Complexity Science. So that's it for now, and hopefully this video will actually be better than the previous one. So, alright, wherever you are and whatever you believe yourself to be doing, I bid you a good day.